How's it going, Ben? Just trying to get some settings fixed here. Just gonna be a real chill live stream. Nothing major, nothing earth shattering, nothing into the world this time. For some reason this thing didn't want to skill properly. So now I gotta fiddle with the dumb thing. Alright, so I guess that's about as good as I'm gonna be able to get it. Alright. Guess I better do the whole share thing. Yep, just being nerds. Man, this thing's taking forever. How's it going, Terror? Thanks for being a fan, I guess. Me having fans is absolutely terrifying. Let's see here. Get the Houston group. Come on. All right. Probably because I was facing away from the mic. Is that any better? Buffering? What do you mean not enough video? It's very straightforward. Oh well, we'll get started here in a moment. Gotta put the gloves on. Alright, so what's everybody been up to lately? Let's see here. Ah, that's the part I want. For some reason, there we go. There's the camera. Finally. Took it long enough. I hate YouTube's new live streaming system. It doesn't actually let you get as intricate with the details, so yeah, it's a bit of a problem. But Susan Wojcicki doesn't seem to care, so, you know, what can you do? Not like any of us are going to go to some magical other platform that doesn't exist, right? Yeah, the SDCX RX-78 is really a lot of fun too. I find it odd that they're experimenting with the SD style, but you know, it's whatever. They do what they want. That's how it be. It's what it do. Come on. There we go. Wild card books by George R.R. Martin. That's odd. Never even heard of such a thing. Let's see, where is it? 14. 14 and 15, I suppose. Soldering knife? Sorry, Wesley. No. How's it going, Diesel? Wesley, everything you type is basically in all caps anyways and intention, so I guess it really doesn't matter. Weirdo. Feel free to ask questions or just go around in the chat. Again, this is a chill stream. Nothing major, nothing life-threatening, nothing into the world. Yet. That isn't TR. What TR are we talking about, big boy? GaoGaiGar and Better Man exist within the same continuity. They're within the same world. The difference is GaoGaiGar is a super robot show. I believe Better Man is a horror story. But Guy's cousin, who shows up in GaoGaiGar Final, is from the Better Men um, sister series. Maybe it is an operation. You don't know. Nobody knows. Except for the Shadow. The Shadow knows. I'm just trying not to get too close to the camera because I'm an old man and my eyes aren't always the best. I use sanding sticks generally. Sandpaper can be a bit too wide for what I do, so I tend to use sanding sticks as opposed to paper. And I don't really know about if the Loyal Subjects is going to do more for Thundercats. I have no clue. It took them so long to get out the first wave. Who knows? It's anybody's guess at this point. I mean, I think this time last year they just started putting out the He-Man ones for their wave 2. And their wave 1 was about a year ahead of Thundercats, if not longer, if I recall correctly. Who knows? How's it going, Venkman? I saw you in the chat earlier making comments about operations. I use stickers when I need to, but if I ever disassemble this thing for painting, stickers are going to be the first thing that goes. I do not like them. Well, yes, I am getting my hands dirty. With little nub marks and little lacerations from the razor blade sometimes. Just be happy I'm not trying to paint this thing right now. I didn't exactly bring my airbrush and compressor with me. I'm out here in McAllen right now, so I'm doing all this in a hotel room. Not the most conducive thing for custom builds, if you wouldn't know. Let's see here. Actually, it's not that it's coming out soon. Is that I think the first couple volumes of that manga are already out. Of course, I highly doubt they're going to get a Western localization, meaning we're probably never going to be able to read them in English, but I know at least one volume's out for sure. I think the second one's out already. I saw it on HobbyLink Japan, but since I can't read it, I didn't see the point in ordering it. I'm sure somebody will eventually do some breakdown of it on the YouTubes. One would assume somebody like Zeta Rise would, but I don't think he's put out new content in 2 to 3 years. Maybe I can bug the guy from Mecha Explained to do it. I don't know. The fun of precise part placement when you're wearing gloves. There we go. Good enough. Favorite Autobots and Decepticons. Favorite Autobots in Season 1 would have to be, of course, the Dinobots. It's kind of my only favorite Autobots in Season 1. Because, you know, not really... While I like the aesthetic of Optimus Prime and I understand why people are really fond of him, his failures as a leader kind of still irritate me, so... Not really the biggest fan of him in terms of personality. Love the toy, though. But, second season... Pretty much the same. For the Decepticons, I enjoyed, of course, Megatron as a whole because I found him amusing. I like Thundercracker for the aesthetic reasons. And that's about it for Season 1. Frankly, when it comes to Transformers, G1 specifically, I'm quite a bit more fond of Season 3 than I am any other season. For Season 3, my favorite Autobots would have to be the main ones. Springer, RC, Cup, Rodimus, obviously, Ultra Magnus. Still love the Dinobots. Decepticons, I'm actually really fond of Octane because he had that entire story arc thing going for him. Love Galvatron because he's just horribly insane and he's just really endearing to me for that reason. I also really like the Predacons, because you just can't go wrong with a lion robot that's got a lion head on his chest. Like, ever. You can never go wrong with that aesthetic. Let's see here. Yeah, the guy who does Mecha Talk also might be a good choice. Wonder why that piece won't stay in. Did I put it in wrong? I don't think so. I guess it just doesn't want to stay in there. Oh well. That's an it problem, not a me problem. And I'd play music, but I'm kind of tired of getting hit by copyright strikes every 5 freaking minutes. I just got one on my last video. Not a strike, but a copyright claim because I used a clip from Thundercats. I'm not even going to argue it because they're not really going to get any money from it, so who cares? I'm like Dan. I'm going after his throat. For Comic Cons, I don't really have any regrets. I have a toy show regret because the same toy show I met Larry Kinney at, Sergeant Slaughter was there too, and it just somehow skipped my mind to go visit him and say hi to him and get his autograph. I was just really tired at the end of that day. There was a lot of driving. As far as merch regrets, I have a merch regret, but not Comic Con related. There's a place in Houston called Traders Village. Basically a giant flea market. And they sell sometimes a lot of bootleg stuff. And I found this one bootleg action figure assortment like a decade ago that had like a bootleg Superman riding some bootleg Power Rangers Velociraptor Zords. And I ignored it the one time. I couldn't remember if I didn't have the money for it or if it was just a fleeting thing. But I still regret not getting those because that's freaking hilarious. And it would have been a great thing to have around as like just a point of conversation, a topic starter at home. That would have been great. But yeah, that's my regret in that sense. Let's see here. What are my thoughts on the expanded Japanese G1 Transformers continuity? I think they had a lot of good ideas. Whether or not they were well expanded on is another story for another time. But I liked Victory from what I saw of it, especially like Desores and Star Saber. I enjoyed some of the stuff from Headmasters and Master Force. Master Force came off a lot more like a Gundam series than Transformers, so that's an unfortunate point of contention I have with that. But I like the designs. I'd love to get a hold of some of the figures, but good God, they get expensive. Good Lord, I picked up Star Saber and Victory Leo at TFCon 2 years ago, and that was close to $1,000 alone for both of them. Not the cheapest hobby to get into, I'll tell you that much. Still need part 20. Yes, it is stupid for a straight use abuse, and trust me, I got something cooking for Dan, but I have to wait until I do it, because I want to see what he's going to do first. Because if he's dumb enough to actually try to take me to court, there's a couple of things that are going to be heavily working against him that I'm going to take full advantage of, and I want to make him sweat it out. But if he doesn't, well, that just moves up my timetable slightly. Now, let's see here. Did you hear owning G1 Megatron in New Jersey is illegal? There is some contention there. I did watch Rodimus Primal's video. I do subscribe to him. I do listen to him. We chat semi-regularly. He's a good guy. But there are some issues here. Number one, interpretation of the law isn't always the easiest thing to do, especially if you're a layperson. It's why I wouldn't recommend making any overt statements about something like that specifically being legal or illegal. If it is as Rodimus states out, because I haven't really, looked into it myself. I don't live in New Jersey. Born there, but don't live there. That could come back and bite people really hard. I think it's reductive. I think it's a pointless law. And it sounds to me more like people are trying to get money for something than it is actually trying to be preventative towards any sort of real action. I think anytime you create a law that targets not the problem, but other random people, you're doing a negative, a net negative. You're not helping anybody. You're certainly not making your law enforcement people look any better by enforcing it. I grabbed the wrong piece. No, I didn't. It's just really weird how this sits in here. I need A22. Gentlemen, this is reductive. Yes, I do miss BotCon. I miss BotCon quite a bit. How's it going, Cal? BotCon was something special. I actually plan on doing a video about it at some point in the near future, but I wanted to get Benson Yee on for it because he has a lot more BotCon experience than I did. But when I was a teenager and really getting heavily into Transformers, BotCon was, not to be offensive here, but sort of like the Transformers mecha for me. It was this thing that I've seen stuff about and I heard about, and it sounded like a lot of fun. And this happened to me about a lot of different things, but between the ages of like 18 and my mid-20s, any thoughts of going out of town to these things or saving up to visit them or to do any of this, somehow I never thought of. So at one point, BotCon was announced in Texas, Dallas specifically. And I'm like, oh, okay, that'd be neat. Wait a minute, I live in Texas. Wait a minute, I can actually go to this convention. And so I went to my very first BotCon that year. My car broke down before I got to the hotel, and it stayed there for several months. I had to ride the bus back, and I'm thoroughly convinced that if hell is, in fact, not a fiery realm, and if it's just some amalgamation of all the things you hate, that hell for me would be a bus station, specifically the Greyhound station. But I enjoyed my time there. I had a lot of fun. I got to meet some people that I'd only talked to online before. And I only got to go to a few BotCons before they finally closed the doors to it for, an amalgamation of different reasons. BotCon was an experience. There was a lot more variety to what you could find in the dealer's room at BotCon. Because unfortunately, when you go to TFCon, it's very much so centric about third-party stuff. And that's great. There's a lot of third-party offerings out there that are really neat. I have some myself. Fought that for a very long time. But you can't really go to TFCon and try to find anything special. Like, there's some Japanese exclusives I would love to get that nobody had. And BotCon was like this place where people would gather and sell these type of things, like room parties or dealers' rooms, characters specifically from Japan. It was really neat, and I really, really miss that experience. I don't know if we're ever going to have anything quite like it. It was special. Let's see here. What are your thoughts on people who grew up in the 90s making an argument 90s cartoons are better than 80s cartoons? Well, again, every decade of animation has its strengths, has its weaknesses, has its struggles and successes. What you consider to be better or worse, greater or lesser, is ultimately going to come down to personal subjective value systems here. There are people who will argue that cartoons from the 2010s were the best, and often that comes from, their personal involvement, how they value those things internally. The 90s wound up giving a lot of studios more liberty in what they could create, but also created, unfortunately, a lot of problems as well. Because it was in the 90s where specific litigation was passed that limited animation in the sense of what they could or could not put on, or that it had to have a certain amount of educational information in cartoons. And that's ultimately what led to the death of the Saturday morning cartoon block a couple decades later. So there's good things in the 90s. There's a lot of bad things in the 90s. I think the 90s had the best cartoon of all time in terms of writing, animation, pacing, and story, and that would be, of course, Batman the Animated Series. But for every Batman the Animated Series, there's like 30 or 40 freaking Troll Warriors and the Stone Guardians or whatever they were called, or the Creepy Crawlers cartoon, or insert whatever one season 13 episode cartoon came out that nobody paid attention to. How's it going, Brock? Let's see here. Are you gay? Well, or why are you gay? Well, you see, I'm not Stalin. Look, man, I know you miss your boyfriend. I get that. And I know that I'm like a father figure to a lot of people in Barrel, but I'll never, ever be your love daddy. I'm sorry. Let's see. How many states have I been to? Oh, God. Do you count just driving through them? Let's see here. Again, I think I said hi to Brock already, but if not, hello, Brock. Allspark. Some of them are really fun. The biggest issue I have with third party outside of my contention with their intellectual property rights, some of them, for some reason, think that complexity means better, and that's not true in a lot of cases. If you get a transformer that's too complex, it's not fun anymore. You know? Like, I don't buy and fiddle with a transformer because I want some complex, super hard puzzle to solve. I do it to have something to fiddle with because I like having something to fiddle with. Good Lord. Some of these third-party companies, they get these transformers made or these figures made, and they're like, let's make this as hard as possible so everyone hates us. Latest big trip. My latest big trip was actually the last BotCon in terms of driving. Like, went all the way from Houston all the way out there to, what was that, Chicago? Was that in Chicago? No, I can't even remember. Back in 2016. Oh, that was a mess of a year for me. It was for a lot of people, apparently. Well, considering the fact that I'm straight and married, Ben, I would sure hope so. Okay, first and foremost, Ben, there's nothing wrong with liking a cartoon. It could be the worst cartoon in the world, and if you like it, you like it. Who cares? As far as Gargoyles goes, I mean, it was a good cartoon from what I understand. I didn't get to watch a lot of it. Parents were not too keen on the concept of Gargoyles for whatever reason. Who knows? But my wife watched it when she was younger, and we owned the DVDs to it, and she's been really fond of it. So, you know, there's that. But no, unless it's a cartoon that is out there doing some really sick stuff, like, there's nothing wrong with just liking a cartoon. More importantly, you should be asking yourself that, not me, if it's right to like something. I'm not going to be the arbiter of that, idea. Ultimately, you are. Yeah, that was really weird, wasn't it, Allspark? That despite the severe design differences, you still got accurate action figures of them, which is odd because last week, if I'm not mistaken, last week or the week before, I actually bought animated Megatron from a tiny little store here, and he's neat. I'll give him that. I'm not really big or super big into animated. I watched it. I thought it was good for what it was. I just think that it's really overhyped, and I don't understand why everybody loses their minds over it. I unfortunately think our community has a bad habit of thinking that making references means the writing's good, and it's not really accurate. Let's see here. What I think about the Clone Wars, I'll get back to you in a minute here, Tara. What little bit I saw I liked. I like Ahsoka as a character, so that's my soft spot there. But I didn't get to see too much of either Clone Wars series because, again, I'm not really much of a Star Wars fan. So what I did see was relegated basically to if I was bored on a Friday night and there was nothing else on. Let's see here. What are our thoughts on the news of the inclusion of Star Saber in the original Marvel G? I think it's going to dick with continuity, and that, again, goes back to my issue with, unfortunately, a lot of nerds in fan communities or fandom in general. They don't quite understand that references and throwing in Easter eggs doesn't necessarily mean it's going to help the writing, and especially for the Marvel comics. We already did Regeneration 1. That was actually really solid. I didn't like the downer ending, but it was still really solid writing. The fact that I felt pain reading the end of it speaks to their abilities. I think they need to leave Marvel 84 alone and focus on other projects. Make better Transformer comics. Don't worry about what happened 30 years ago. Yes, I have had a Fig with GPS. I've had a couple of them. They're always fun to be very fragile with. Of course, there's also the variation of that with poor Beast Wars Megatron here in the States, which is why everybody pays an absurd sum to get the Japanese version because his plastic, being black. Let's see here. Did I watch the Invader Zim movie? And what did I think of it? Yes, I did watch it. I thought the writing was good. I thought the series was decent. My issue comes down to the fact that they did some design changes that I'm not really too big on due to aesthetic reasons. See, one sticker, tiny little thing, little gray nose. And I really didn't like the fact that they changed the color palette. They made it a lot more pastel and a lot brighter, and just wasn't digging it. That's part of the thing when you can tell if they're using newer technology for an older product. The color palette just shifts to an absurd degree. And I can also tell that they're shading everything with a grayish purple hue, as opposed to however they do it traditionally. And I know because I use that for my shading in some of my art. I love Beast Wars The Gathering. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I also like the fact that the character whose name I get mine from likes to make bad jokes just as much as I do. Let's see here. Freaking stickers. Should have just brought paint. Mistakes were made. Stalin, I'm going to reach through the screen and I'm going to strangle the life from your scrawny little neck. I know what you look like. I know where you live. I can find you. Wants me to put stickers 7 and 8 on the bottom teeth. That's not happening. Like, no. But I will correct something on the headpiece here. On the kabuto. I hated the Dreamwave Transformer comics. I didn't when they first came out because it was something. We hadn't seen much G1 related in a while in terms of writing. Plenty of reissues and whatnot. I think the Toys R Us ones were pretty big at that point. The very first reissues we got in the 2000s. Wound up getting plenty more. But I hated the art style. Pat Lee always irritated me with that. He doesn't understand proportions. He doesn't get that metal doesn't crack like glass. A lot of artists don't get that, unfortunately. And the story was... Here's my biggest issue when it comes to people trying to take children's properties and make them age up with the people who were the original target audience. It comes off really bad. Hearing Optimus Prime and Megatron cuss at each other doesn't add anything for me. If anything, it reduces stuff. Hold on, gotta go hunt apart the one flying. Just give me a minute. Ooh, I hate it when parts go flying because then I have a hard time finding them. Ah, well, I'll find it later. When I have more time. All right, let's see here. Do I have Lego sets? No. I have a couple of Mega Block ones, specifically in a Ninja Turtle Technodrome, but I haven't assembled it. It is being written by the ever awesome Simon Furman, who, in my opinion, hasn't written anything bad. Well, except, I actually enjoyed the G2 comics, unironically. He also, oddly enough, wrote for some of the Thundercat comics in the UK back in the 80s. Best Starscream is Prime Starscream from Transformers Prime. Of course I know about the Thundercats musical. It's actually one of the most lost pieces of Thundercats media out there. Nobody ever had anything recorded from it, so we don't know anything about it. Take it easy, Allspark. I'm well aware. I'm well aware of what happened behind the scenes. And he still owes people money, including Simon Furman. I'm going to put that there in case I do find the part. If not, oh well, I'll figure something out. The funny thing is the color doesn't blend in with the carpet. There's just so much carpet and not exactly the brightest hotel room, so wasn't going to be fun to find anyways. Continuing on. Maybe I'll do this again tomorrow night. Maybe I'll keep doing this until I have this entire thing built, because it's certainly better than watching the Adult Swim block on Cartoon Network. Thing's garbage at this point. Like, unmitigated garbage. Can't even enjoy it ironically. Assemble a couple more of these pieces, and then I'll look at the chat again. There we go. Kind of. There we go. Girl asks a guy what he does for a job. He says he races cars. She says, that sounds like fun. He asks when he races. He answers, no, the cars are much faster. Okay. Okay, then. Yes, Robot Chicken is still going, unfortunately. see, the funny thing is, Brock, I'm not stupid enough to fall for that bait. You're going to have to target somebody who's dumber than me. Rawr. Rawr. There we go. Let me put Galleon up here. Oh, better remove that nub mark first. Rah. You are just not going to stay in there, are you? Favorite Titans from the Autobots and Decepticons? I mean, there's not many of the Titans. We're talking about city-class Transformers. So I'm kind of limited there. I mean, obviously Fort Max is a contender, and so is Trypticon. Fort Max because he was the biggest, and again still is, and Trypticon because he's a giant dinosaur. Where can you go wrong? I don't think Snarf ever gave bad advice. I think all of his advice is pretty solid. You just have to take it in context. So, ha. Favorite mobile suit? Well, that's the thing. It would vary from series to series. Like, my favorite mobile suit in Gundam Wing would be the Epion or the Ultron. And my favorite suit in, say, G Gundam would be either the G Gundam itself or the Master Gundam. Because, I mean, it's Master Asia. He's my Gundam spirit animal. But I'm also fond of things like the Tallgeese too. I like the design of the RX-78-2, but I'm not really a big fan of the original Gundam. I feel that it's unfortunately overrated in terms of how well it is done. I think the animation, even for the decade it was in, suffered far more than it really realistically should have. And I think people overblow the writing of it to where they act like it's some epic epoch that tells the struggle between class warfare and, you know, how there's good on both sides, but it's pretty obvious there's good guys and bad guys in the original Gundam. Like, you don't make your villains themed to look like literal space Nazis and say, well, this is nuanced. It doesn't quite work like that. Yes, I like Gundam Unicorn too. My wife's favorite Gundam suit is the Banshee. Hands down. I actually got her the perfect grade for her birthday some years ago, and she really enjoyed that. I like the fact that Epion is not a distance fighter. It is a dueling suit first and foremost. And he has this giant beam longsword. It's freaking rad. Nothing recently that came across my eye in terms of lost or old school media. I tend to be pretty up to date on things. Let's see either comic book villain or villains. The Red Ghost. And I actually was really fond of Kite Man, and I really liked what Tom King ultimately did with him in the War of Jokes and Riddles, and the fact that he's an ongoing character in Batman now. I liked Tempest Fugit, the Clock King. Like, there's a lot of D-list villains that I'm really fond of, but that's more in sense of their trappings than it is probably on a personality level. Correct. One you can extend large enough to take out an entire freaking space station, a colony. Good lord. Question. Oh, you mean like the fact that he decided to take his depression out on the entire crew of Zeta Gundam, maybe? Like, I ain't depressed. I will kill all my characters and make everybody else sad, too. And then for the next series, I'm going to pretend like I learned something, and then I'm going to turn around and make Gundam Victory. There we go. Ah, the Jigen and the Comfer, huh? Comfer was like, unquestionably, hey, can we make it more German? They're like, yes, we can. But not too German, but as a sound German. I've never read Irredeemable, so I couldn't give any thoughts on it. Doesn't really sound like the type of comic I'd be interested in, were I to be completely honest with you, which I tried to do regardless. I really enjoyed G Gundam. I didn't get to see it until, God, what was it, 2014, 2012? I can't remember when I saw it, but it wasn't during its original Toonami run for the obvious reasons. But I enjoy Wing as well. I enjoy it unironically. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as most people will say it is, because I've unfortunately learned within a lot of Gundam groups, they have this really odd turnaround issue where they'll talk about how good a series is, and then the minute something new comes along, suddenly the previous series was garbage, and they don't really know how to articulate that very well. They did that with Unicorn the moment Iron Blooded Orphans came out. It was really weird to watch. But Gundam Wing is confusing. It doesn't make sense. Well, sure, if you don't pay attention. I think it made a lot of very interesting statements. I think its depiction of the socio-political landscape was very interesting. You're not going to really like Gundam Wing unless you like philosophical and, political intrigue. Otherwise, you're just going to be bored. I mean, of course, that's why you like Double X. Why wouldn't you? The Wing Zero system was the out-of-universe explanation or comparison to the new type ability to be magic people somehow, even though this is supposed to be a real robot series. It's weird. Can't tell I have my issues with Gundam as well, unfortunately. Mumra versus Ganondorf. Well, let me ask you a question. Is Ganondorf immortal? In the sense that I'm not talking about in the sense that he resurrects. I'm talking about in the sense that can he be killed? Oh, I almost missed that part. Yeah, I don't even watch Seed. Never did. Didn't care enough to watch it. Okay, are you saying yes that Ganondorf is immortal? Because last I checked, he's very much so mortal. I mean, you can kill him in the games. Let's see here. All right, if he can be killed, then he's going to lose to Mumra. And he's going to lose to Mumra for a few reasons. Number one, Ganon is evil by nature, and Mumra's literal power source is evil itself. Ganon's existence only ensures the continual existence of Mumra. That's why you can't really kill him. And if you can kill Ganondorf and you can't kill Mumra, then, well, Ganondorf's going to die and he's not going to come back. I see we had another question, so give me a minute to refix this sticker, and I'll answer that question. That's probably why I want me to put it on afterwards, but I don't listen to instructions. Because otherwise, if I get this thing painted, I ain't going to worry about the stickers. Let's see here. Mumra's head was cut off, even if it could be. Would it continue to be alive? And if so, would it be like a headless horseman type of deal? I'd imagine sooner or later he'd reconstitute back at the pyramid. There was at one point in time Mumra was reduced to ash and just came back. So, yeah. And I know in the comics for the Dog of War story arc, he actually did lose an arm and he just regenerated it. Because why wouldn't you be able to? You're Mumra the Ever Living. You can't die. To the halfway flash anim. Oh, Hathaway's Flash. I don't know. I know the Hathaway's Flash in terms of the novel is very, very sad. Because Tomino doesn't know how to write a story that's like, oh, this might actually have a happy ending. No, nobody gets a happy ending. You all suffer because he suffers. I do have a favorite era of Batman comics. My favorite era of Batman comics are the mid to late 80s. Matter of fact, if you'll give me a minute here, I'll even show you something I got while I was down here that's related to that. Post-Crive is up to before Cataclysm, No Man's Land. I haven't read all of No Man's Land. I have read Cataclysm, though. I've never seen Slayers. In fact, I watch very few comedy-centric anime because some of it just really boils down to cultural jokes, and I'm not going to get all those. Really did like Cromartie High, though. That show was funny. I mean, it had Freddie Mercury in it. How could it not be funny? He's just as vulnerable. He's more vulnerable to physical attacks when he's a shriveled prune person. But again, his constitution's ultimately going to come down to the fact that he's immortal. You can't really kill him. You can drain him, you can push him back, you can keep him at bay, but you can't remove him. I think that's the point. You can't really get rid of evil, you can only keep it at bay. Brian Michael Bendis is literally the reason why I stopped reading the Superman comics after Rebirth. I cannot stand that clown's writing. Oh, hold on, I think I see something here I need to fix. There we go. Let's see here. Do you think of yourself as a good person, and by what standards do you judge others by the... But what... Hold on. Do you think of yourself as a good person, by what standards, and you judge others by the same standards? Do I think of myself as a good person? No. I think of myself as a horribly flawed person. Just like I think everybody else is horribly flawed. By what standards? By my theological standards. And the standard therein is that we're all terrible. And based on how life tends to be, doesn't exactly prove that to be wrong. Well, I consider Slayers to be a comedy based on what I've seen of it. It always seems to really be gaggy. A lot of running jokes. I think at one point a character actually shows their entire rib cage leading to their heart because they're trying to impress somebody. I mean, it seems very, very silly to me. Not in a bad way silly, just, want to be funny silly, which is fine. I also never forgive Brian Michael Bendis for ruining ultimately Super Sons because that was really wholesome and fun and good, and he sucked it. Made it terrible by aging Connor Kent up for some asinine, God forbidden reason because the man's a hack and can't figure out what to do with the most simplistic characters. If you struggle writing Superman, you need to stop writing. I think it's more important to try to be a good person than it is to, go around saying you are. Actions always speak louder than words. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to finish the upper body. And tomorrow, hopefully earlier than this time, I'll do this again and we'll do the lower body. And that'll be done. What do you guys think? If you like that idea, go ahead and press 1 in the chat. That's 8 and 9, okay. Alright, so I guess that's what we're going to do tomorrow. Anybody who looks at comics and their first concern is, well, this isn't like real life, probably needs to rethink what their business is going to be. Because if you're writing fiction, the point is to mess with reality and have fun with it. Exaggerate, play with the idea. You don't sit there and... There are times where you should look at realistic responses or realistic attributes or aspects of something, but not when we're talking about superheroes in the sense of their identity or their very being. The fact that Michael Bendis decided, well, stupid Superman is a secret identity, just proves he doesn't really understand a character. And the fact that he stopped working at Marvel should have been DC's wake-up call to say, maybe we shouldn't hire this clown. But no, DC doesn't think so. Let's see here. What do I think of thoughts of people? Well, I mean, whether they're intimidated by me, I mean, that's ultimately their issue. But generally, I found that people that are intimidated by me, they probably did something dumb. And that's probably why they're intimidated. That or they're so low in terms of what they're able to handle as far as, so I'm looking for, a confrontation, that they don't know how to deal with somebody who has a type A personality. I feel, unfortunately, a lot of people in the younger generation tend to be overly coddled in terms of what they handle. But that's probably just me being an old man. Who knows if it's actually reflective of reality as a whole? I don't know. Locomotive. Good Lord. instructions got this backwards on one part. Or I just misassembled it. Let's find out. I've been in multiple car crashes. They're not fun. At one point, I got in one that was so bad I wanted to roll in the vehicle, and the vehicle ultimately caught fire and exploded. That was not a fun day for me. I'd share the image on Twitter, but I have a friend that actually has mental triggers, and that would upset them seeing that because they get really freaked out by car accidents, and I don't want to cause any undue stress on that person. Aspire to be on. What is my level? That doesn't even make any sense, Brock. People are different. I don't expect people to act like me. I don't expect them to be like me. I don't expect them to think like me. I expect them to be whoever they are and just use their brains. I'm just a human being. Nothing special. I think I might be putting the wrong parts together. Then I just don't have this synced on correctly, which is probably the more likely scenario here. Definitely. I'm not really much of a music connoisseur. I'm probably the wrong person to ask about that, 80s or otherwise. I'm not really very knowledgeable about music. It's never really been my forte. I like all animals. Cats, dogs, snakes, rabbits, rats. I like animals in general. I understand them. They make sense. They aren't as held back by the obsessiveness humans tend to have. Of course, for this one it goes in perfectly. Why am I not surprised? I don't know anything about the Ramones. Again, I just admitted I know very little about music. You know, having the longest run doesn't mean anything if your run doesn't do anything. Doesn't matter if you're a marathon runner if you don't reach the freaking finish line. I don't know what that hole's for. It must be for the Hell on Heaven move. I gotcha. I'm picking up what you're putting down, kid. Don't worry. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I think children are children. Overrated is something you use to describe fiction, not people, in terms of existence. If I thought children were overrated, I wouldn't spend so much time trying to keep them safe. While I do not plan to have children of my own, I'm not about to sit here and dog people who do or tell them they're being foolish or whatever have you. That's just disingenuous, and it's not my place. I don't think there's anything inherently funny about it. It's not like, say, Adventure Time where you can spend an episode looking for a waving snail or anything. It's not. It's not quite like that. While there are animation errors, there's nothing really so major that it just makes you lose it. There's some funny moments, but that's usually just things in the backdrop being clever or whatnot. Not really an animation issue. Yeah, we don't talk about The Simpsons for two reasons. Number one, it's certainly overstayed its welcome based on what I've heard of people talking about it within the cultural zeitgeist. Also, I didn't watch The Simpsons as a kid. It was one of the many shows that was verboten in my household. And frankly, I think that was a wise decision by my parents. Not just because it wasn't a show made for kids. That is not a children's show. I don't care if it's animated. I don't care if it was on Fox. That's not a kid's show. And kids shouldn't be watching it. And I've also grown up without having watched it with a certain level, or certain lack rather, of cynicism that I've noticed a lot of people who grew up watching it tend to have. That might, of course, just be me attributing something to that is just my personal view. May not be representative. It might be a correlation without causation. But that's just from what I personally noticed. I've seen parts of the Godzilla animated series on Fox, but I have not seen the majority of it. The Godzilla film from that era left such a sour taste in my mouth, I never checked it out as a kid. Too disappointed in the fact that Godzilla wasn't, well, Godzilla. It was whatever that clown tried to do that He clearly didn't understand the character. Godzilla isn't just some giant monster, and if you write him like that, you're going to have trouble. But what do I know? I'm just some schmo who talks about cartoons and toys on the internet. I don't have a big fancy degree. Probably not qualified for such high level thinking. Alright, upper body of the little dude's done. I'll find his little green G-stone probably tonight before I go to bed, so, you know, housekeeping doesn't accidentally sweep it up. Rawr. If you haven't watched GaoGaiGar, you need to. It's a really good show. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and give it about, 30 seconds here before I end the stream. Let's see here. Paper stickers? I have no idea what that is. You're right, Blair. I am a giant monster. Thank you for admitting that. This is my friend Blair. Blair does a lot of streaming on Twitch. He plays random video games, and he is an absolute animal in Smash Brothers. I have no clue what goes on in that game. Like, I cannot for the life of me follow it. And unfortunately, Blair, you showed up at the very end of the stream. I'm about to call it off here in a few minutes. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. You guys take it easy. Have a good evening.